a lot of it is just like proactivity and overproduction. Like just if a client is curious about something, and this is just a tip for any agency out there, just pile in, give them everything they need, throw all your resources at it and fix it.
Welcome to All Killer No Filler. I'm Eric Dick. It's Friday. We are Pilothouse, and here's how we're moving the needle for our clients this week. Now, this week, we've decided to bring on some Pilothouse team members to talk about a specific phenomenon that all marketers have experienced: creative burnout. We're going to be talking about how to avoid it and what to do, what not to do when it happens. Speaking of burnouts, just kidding. I want you to meet Nate Vankoughnet. He's one of our longest standing team members. He's one of our lead media buyers. Also, we have Cam Wind on with us today, who is Pilothouse's creative director. And of course, Kylh Eitchcox, co-founder of Pilothouse, here to discuss this riveting topic that Nate just actually spent a lot of time this week writing some great copy about that we might be able to include in the show notes. So like all Facebook marketers, we've experienced the pain of creative burnout. Over time, or sometimes all at once, creatives that were once killer sadly become filler. Now, Pilothouse has been spending at very high volumes over the past several months, and this has given us a lot of opportunities to experience massive creative success, but also creative burnout. And we've built some knowledge and tactics to correct it and to avoid it altogether. Welcome to the cast, guys. How are you feeling this Friday?
Great.
Good, Eric.
Yeah. Happy Friday. Pretty good.
I'm pretty excited to bring some of the team members on this week. I think it's going to be some fresh perspective. And these two guys here, Nate and Cam, they've really led the charge in scaling and coming up with creative strategies that are helping our clients win. So I'm super stoked to get into this.
Nice. Yeah, we just got to spread. We have such a great team. We've got a growing team. We've got leaders that are emerging on the team all the time. And our goal with this content is just to bring people up into this and give spread the love and let everyone kind of share their genius, because we definitely have a lot of it on the team. Now let's start with a discussion around the best practices, Pilothouse philosophy around the Facebook pixel, and how it interacts with our target audiences as well as our creatives. Nate, can you tell us a little bit about Facebook Power5 and what that is?
For sure. So yeah, Facebook Power5 is essentially a list of 5 tactics and tools that Facebook deems essential that you should use when doing Facebook marketing at scale. So it's comprised of dynamic ads, auto advanced matching, account simplification, CBO, and auto placements. So I'll touch on these briefly here. So dynamic ads, as we all know, basically you run one ad with multiple creatives, multiple copy variations, headlines, and Facebook chooses which to show to who. So they equally get tested and you can see kind of which one performs best, and combinations as well. So we use this kind of at small scale when we're running a new offer, testing with minimal budgets. This is a good way to kind of find new winners, find angles that are going to work with the client, etc. And then auto advanced matching, which is basically, this allows Facebook to take more information from your site on potential customers. So things like form fields, names, etc. And then account simplification, which is basically Facebook wants you to spend your full budgets through as little campaigns as possible in order to supercharge the Facebook pixel, get through the learning phase faster. And then the fourth one is CBO. So this is basically campaign budget optimization, which allows Facebook kind of full reins over, the audience it's going to show ads to, and then which ads inside. So kind of the next level above ad side optimization, rather than just Facebook being able to choose the ads and the person, it's going to choose the audiences if you're breaking your ad sets out by audience. And then the fifth is auto placements, which, as we all know, is basically just giving Facebook kind of full range of the placements to use. One thing to note here is that it's super important to always optimize if you're using auto placements on the ad level. You can kind of tailor your creatives to fit each placement on the ad level. If you don't, sometimes stories can look a little wonky and such. But yeah, that's the Facebook Power5, and we definitely use those every day. There's some we use more than others. And I mean, there's some instances where, it might not make sense to consolidate all your campaigns when you're at super high scale. If you want to test creatives and be sure that you're getting, full budget spent on them, it might make sense to break them under their own campaign.
But basically, the philosophy of the Power5 appears to be just give as much control to Facebook's tools as you can, and sort of set up your campaigns in a way that gives them the most data, the most visibility to kind of let them do their magic. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
There's it's kind of like this conflicting thing though, right? Like there's scale where these tools are built for and designed, just feed it, right? Just like give Facebook the Power5, give it everything it needs. But then there's situations where you're not able to because there's not enough creative resources, or there's not enough budget, or you don't actually have your conversion rates yet. And so like looking at these 5 elements at different times in your structure, depending on where you are in your campaign, be it new launch or you're scaling hard, which is where you get into burnout. Each of these has a place. All of them have a place when you're scaling.
For sure.
Totally.
And on the contrary, some don't work as well at high scale. Things like, for us anyway, dynamic ads, we don't really use them, when we're testing, myself anyway, when I'm testing at super high scale budgets, just because for the simple fact that Facebook will optimize towards one, combination of assets more than others. And so when at super high scale, trying to spend at least a few grand on a creative test every day, it just makes sense in my mind to break that into its own campaign, make sure I can test those creative assets across my top audiences, and just know that I'm getting enough sufficient spend for me to really make that decision if a creative's a winner or not.
Awesome. So give us some examples of, because I know, a lot of the stuff that came up this week was because of very high volume spend where we're spending sort of 7 figures in a month, and creative burnout is sort of bound to happen when you're hitting such a large audience. But just talk a little bit about like why creative burnout happens and when it happens in these types of campaigns.
For sure. So if you think about it, it makes sense that creative burnout happens because it's kind of the fundamental fact that a certain creative combination works for a certain specific demo for a specific reason. So for example, an ad, or say a millennial is going to sign up to a service for a different reason than, somebody that's 60 plus is going to sign up for that service. So that angle needs to be tailored towards, that demo. And those are finite audiences, and, each angle is going to work for a finite group of people. And, so when you're spending and you're hitting that hot audience, sometimes your pixel gets firing, your campaign's converting really well, and then all of a sudden it'll drop off. This is most likely because, Facebook has spent through a hot audience. It's found a group of people that ad really resonates with, but it's bound to run out eventually. And this doesn't really mean that it's never going to find another group of that audience again. It's just burnt through that hot audience. And so, it needs to go out and try and find another group of people that resonate well with that ad. But then when we're running at scale, sorry, Kyle, when we're running at scale, this obviously happens faster because we're spending through these audiences a lot faster. We're reaching far, far more people every day.
And just for conversation's sake too, like, we don't, there's audiences, but a lot of the stuff we're running is open. And so like we're treating this creative as its own message. And it's not that, and that message is only going to resonate with a certain percentage of the population. And when you start reaching more and more people with that message, you need to find a new message or a new angle. So it's not necessarily just about the product. Like, it's not like consumers are just seeing product. It's which angle or approach or style of creative have they seen that resonates with that group, and then letting the pixel do its thing that way.
Yeah, like the way I visualize it is like, if you literally think of the audience as, whether those are tens of thousands, 100,000s, or millions of people, the algorithm is taking all these variables that we choose as a creative combination, using its process to identify which path it's going to show that ad to within that group of people. But if those variables remain constant, it's obvious that eventually that's going to burn out. So introducing new variables into that creative combination is going to always, keep that engine going and allow Facebook to find new conversions over time.
And so would you say that we're definitely like an angle first, the way we think about creative and even campaign structure is sort of like angle centric, where it's like you take a look at the product, you come up with as many angles as possible. And then you don't try to like fit, okay, this angle is going to work with this audience and you put that audience targeting. Is it more just like we create the angles and then we leave it to Facebook to match the angles that we're putting into the audiences?
I think it's even a step before that. I think we like to try and put consumers into buckets first, buckets of people that not even just demo, but, they would sign up. This group of people might sign up for this reason. Another group of people might sign up for this reason or buy for this reason. And then at that point, we try and make angles to, touch on those reasons that somebody might, purchase or sign up or whatever they're doing.
Start with the why.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding like what problem you're truly solving for these people, and then identifying angles that, you can then market with. Really.
And just going back, there's different scale again, right? So like you ask a question specifically about the approach, Eric. It's like early on, you're like Nate said, you're taking those reasons and then you're going up and you're looking at angles to get them to trigger that behavior. Yeah. But that's early on or mid-level, or when you get capacity to add more angles or you have more budget because you're confident in your other early tests. But when you're scaling, it's different. You kind of know what's going on. And I think it'd be good for, Cam to touch on that a little bit about kind of process and how we're avoiding burnout.
Yeah, it's obviously very different at scale than it is when we're doing early on testing. Some of the clients that we're spending a lot of money with, we've already gone through that process of identifying which angles are working and, even what type of creatives or formats are going to be working best. So like, some of the clients we're really lucky that have a great team and provide us with, great angles, great creatives. And we use that to make sure we format them correctly based on what we know what's working, and then work with buyers like Nate to deploy them in a way that makes sense on Facebook and gives it the ammunition it needs to drive conversions.
And Cam, like you have your eyes, like your team has eyes on the creative, like you're actually in the data.
Yeah, I like the way we have it set up. So when I'm working with Nate on an account, not only is he, buying media, but I'm also in the back of the account and I'm looking at the creative reporting tool. I'm understanding like what's working day to day, month to month, and seeing kind of trends over time. And then we touch base pretty much daily or if not weekly, and figuring out what our next step is and what creatives like we need down the road so we can coordinate with the clients to figure out what we need.
Interesting. One of the things I read a really great piece this week on just how important avatars are for any form of advertising. How, you don't want to call out any clients, but how sophisticated are our clients when they come to us with these kind of pre-made avatars built out? Is that something that we can kind of push back on clients and really ask them to give us these avatars? What's that process like?
Everyone's really busy. And so like, it depends on how organized the client is. We have, especially recently, we've had a lot of brands that are more brand focused than not. And so like they have their personas built out, they've done their market research, they've built their case studies, but they haven't gone to market yet. And so a lot of companies have that. Sometimes we find that once we start running ads, that information is actually incorrect due to the demand. We actually find demand elsewhere, which I always find, I'm not surprised, but I'm always kind of like, haha, a little bit of satisfaction there in knowing that it's just about those tests and giving them that feedback. Whereas we have other people who are already live, who know their consumers, who have their avatars.
Yeah, like funny enough, I was gonna say that even like
forged avatars.
Yeah.
Even just this morning, like we've been working with a client for 3 or 4 months now. And he messaged me on Slack this morning being like, I'm redefining our UVP based on the learnings that we're getting in Facebook. And this is like something that like this company's been around for a while, and they're actually just rethinking that based on the learnings that our team is giving them from Facebook. So it's cool to see people revisiting that.
Yeah. That's really cool, Cam. I love hearing that. I can think of another one where that happened before. I mentioned it previously. Like they're like, City Slicker, whatever, is they're buying this underwear product, but turns out it's moms buying it for their kids. It's moms who think that that's what their kids should be. It's not the actual kids wanting to be that. And, we come across this fairly often.
Yeah, it's from the Vessi cast, right? Like they literally went to market with this idea of helping their community. And then they just found out that their community, a huge part of their community, were actual nurses and frontline workers who love their waterproof shoes because they protect their feet against medical fluids, essentially.
Right.
And just by putting that marketing out there, they were able to uncover a whole like super valuable subculture within their customers. So that's really awesome to hear. And I imagine like reading comments and staying on top of comments is a huge part of being able to like unearth those, those angles as well and those audiences.
For sure.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our process for actually creating our content. We the fact that we have, there are some agencies out there that we know that work a lot with outsourced, mostly outsourced creative. We've taken a different approach where we have our sort of internal creative directors, and then there's still, an ability to leverage outsourced as well. But when it comes to like taking a client on, what's the process like for building out their creative?
So yeah, you definitely go through a discovery process when we're onboarding new clients. Like the weeks leading up to a launch on Facebook, from a creative standpoint, what we want to do with them is do a little recon onto what's been working, what angles, if they're even using angles, but which ones have worked, what their competitors are doing, and have these open discussions with them. And then with those learnings, kind of identify what problems we're solving, what angles we're going to use to tackle those. And then within a bucket even lower than that, identify what formats and what actual imagery and stuff that we can use to execute on those angles from a creative standpoint. And then it depends on the client, but some clients are working with creative agencies, some clients are shooting the creative themselves, and then some clients are going to rely on us to do it. So it's all about figuring out what that workflow is going to look like, and then putting that all together. And then, of course, getting learnings on Facebook side and iterating.
It's a real trick after that discovery call too, because everyone comes out of these meetings super hot, but to be honest, sometimes you run into challenges where we're not actually getting the creative that we need, or we're not getting like we're not able to test the messaging that we want, or whatever. So it really is a back and forth collaborative kind of process. And usually after a month or two, Cam, it's probably fair to say like we find a middle ground usually, and we kind of fall into a pattern that works for both parties. But it does take some time.
Yeah, and like a process that like we're seeing come up time and time again. Like clients kind of come in with an expectation as to like what their brand is, like what kind of creative is going to work before they even work with us, and that's kind of like how they kind of anchor their creative. And when we come in, we have all of this experience. And we kind of have our own ideas of what's going to work. And we basically need to bridge that gap and try and maybe push them or steer them in a direction of performance. And that's often what we try and do with the creative.
So talk about iteration. I know at scale, like I'm watching the Slack channels go, and at scale, when we're running these 7-figure, monthly campaigns, the amount of creative that gets tested and built into your media buying plans there, Nate, is pretty astounding. But like, yeah, talk about like when you're starting out, like how many sets of creatives do we come to the table with when we launch a campaign? For
sure. Yeah. I think we kind of put that into two kind of separate buckets here. But it's a good note to talk about. So a lot of the creative that even Cam's doing, it's not always this whole like new angle, new creative thing. A lot of it is iterations. We find what's been working for the client. We find what's working for us, and we just make variations on variations on variations and test, different copy variations, different headline variations with images that work well, throwing different overlays on images, different effects, cropping videos differently. We're testing all these different things that do make differences. And I think that's kind of a good segue into combating, this creative burnout when launching new campaigns. So one thing I've been doing at scale, and I've seen it work really well, but this is kind of after I've found out that a creative works. So I'm letting it run in my scale campaign, but I don't want it to burn out. Eventually it will. So I'll build out a new campaign, testing my 3 best prospecting audiences, and 1 stacked retargeting audience. And I'll launch 4 or 5 ad sets, and in each ad set, I've got the same creative and then different copy variations across ad sets. And this I know the creative works already, and this is going to just help me, push that creative at super high volume without it burning out, because Facebook's using CBO, Facebook's got this choice of audience to show it to, as well as, copy variation on that ad. And so I've kind of seen that work a lot. But when testing, brand new stuff, I do like to just test it pretty simply. I'll build out, a test campaign. This is where I'm testing new creatives, brand new stuff. But I want to make sure I'm giving it the best chance possible. So I'm obviously using CBO, auto placements, and then I'm testing it across my 4 best audiences that I have proven work. So, my stacked lookalikes, lookalikes of repeats, a stacked retargeting audience, and then of course an open audience, so we can really get scale with it. And then, from there, I'll find winners and do what I just talked about previously, breaking it out, iterating on, copy, creative variations, and building that into its own test campaign.
I have a question, Nate. There's one client we're talking about. Well, the one I'm thinking of, anyways. How many creatives win of these iterations and variations? Or Cam, maybe you can talk to that. But what percentage is actually succeeding in the volume of ad tests that we're doing?
A very, very small percentage. There's a lot of testing that goes into finding these winners, and it's just important to see early signs, so you're not wasting budget spending on things that you're just hoping might work eventually. But we're testing hundreds of variations a month at times, and most of them don't work. Kind of the 80-20 rule type thing, where we see majority of what we're trying doesn't work, but it's the ones that do that we're really able to scale, and it kind of pushes the needle. So.
But the craziest thing about this specifically, this UGC, which I think we'll get into, but same age demo, same age person, 8 images, all holding the same product or bill or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And one of them will work, but they're basically identical.
Yeah. Yeah. Holding the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's strange. And we'll test it. We'll test all of those images with the same copy, and obviously one of them just does well for whatever reason it is.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people think the guy's funny looking or something like that, so
right.
It gets a lot of engagement, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Then we'll test the most subtle, headline or copy variations, and with the exact same creative, and that'll make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, like an example on that client, if you're just talking about pricing or money saved or some kind of number example, it's literally a matter of changing one digit from a 1 to a 9 or something like that. And we've tested that, and it's crazy to see the variance between all of those different numbers that we use.
Yeah,
it is. And then how much can you glean from each campaign, from each client, to bring to the next? Because it's always going to be a mix between starting from scratch and rapid iteration, but also just knowing, okay, well, we're going to want to try a 3D style animation. We're going to want to try to make the text pop out like this. We know that this word might work better than this word. It's interesting to think about what we're able to take from client to client, and what has to be a new process of learning each time.
Yeah, no, definitely. That kind of goes back to the point, as far as onboarding and discovery, I think clients are going to have a certain expectation as to what's going to work and what's not. And then we know from other clients what works and what doesn't. And that's a 3D style animation, UGC just works. There's stuff that works and it's going to always work. So we just went through a process yesterday where we sent a client basically a brief outlining of shit that works. UGC works, and there's certain product focused shots that we know works, but there's certain shots of people using a product that works, and we send that to the client and say, hey, listen, this is working, why don't we try this? If your expectation is this and it's not working, let's at least move in that direction. So we always try and pull in elements from other stuff that's working.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about UGC and how we're using influencers on some of these campaigns, and how the influencer creative comes to inform the rest of the creative we're using. What are some good examples of some influencers, not specific influencers, but some influencer strategies that we're using?
Yeah, I can hop in here. So one of the things we've been doing a lot of lately, and I know we're testing it across multiple accounts. We're actually testing it at scale with one of our clients right now, and it's working quite well. Mostly for retargeting, so kind of middle to bottom of funnel, but super, super effective. I think we've been averaging around a 4 times return on ad spend. But what we've been doing is we've been getting, they have the client, this is super helpful. They reach out to influencers for us. They have kind of an influencer internal team that they're reaching out to influencers constantly. And so we're onboarding influencers that, make posts about the brand as well as just provide us with content, so just sending us content that we can run through our ad account. But we've built out a separate ad account, same Facebook page, everything like that. But we're running through the influencers' Instagram accounts. So we get permissions to run ads through their Instagram accounts. And we're running the posts that they're tagging us in, as well as some of the content they're sending over. And so what's really cool here is that we've been seeing it work really well for retargeting. And then one of the things that we obviously want to do is make it work for prospecting, because that's really where all the scale is. We're kind of limited to our scale in our main account if we're just retargeting. So one of the things we've been doing to try to combat that, and we're seeing some decent early results, has been to get creative from the influencer. They don't need to post it, because the influencers aren't always going to want to post what we know works on Facebook, just because they need to keep up with their brand. And so we're getting this content from influencers, building our own ads through their accounts and running it. And then we're excluding their audiences. And so it's never shown on their account. Their audience doesn't see it, but we're able to hit new people, with this influencer promoting a product, with creative that we know works. So that's been pretty effective so far. But this has been really solid in kind of helping combat, creative burnout, and just another aspect of something we've been, testing to just keep creative in our funnel flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're doing really that. We're doing that across a few accounts. So Nate's, I think you're working on one account specifically doing this.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 other accounts, but like I'm thinking of another account, and they're getting a new influencer post every week or so. And doing that, it drastically increases the ROAS as a fresh perspective. And we've talked a lot about like third-party sites and content just to reinforce your original brand's message. Like so much of that is like, oh, if this guy's using it, I'm going to use it. Even though it's basically the same ad going to the same cart, it's just, that personal feeling, that word of mouth experience.
Sure.
I was gonna say, I think it's also about how people like actually digest it, like in their social feeds. Like people are just so used to seeing that content in that format, coming down their feed. So if you see it that way, I'm not gonna just immediately scroll past that ad. I'm gonna see what people are saying most of the time.
Yeah, it's definitely a killer strategy
too, right? With what you're doing with the branded efforts, it's like that quote that we talked about last week. Don't tell me about the moonlight. Show me it glinting off a piece of glass on the ground. That's a similar idea. It's like you get hit with product ads, and then you see different angles of the product reflected back to you from people that you follow or respect. It's just going to work. It's going to help the whole campaign.
For sure. And this goes back to just, people are going to convert for a specific reason and for a different reason than the next person. And, some people just, they want to know that there's, famous or influencers, wearing that product, using that product. And so that works super, super well for some of this audience. So it's super important to have that kind of integrated into your whole funnel, just so that when people are going through your funnel, they're getting hit by all these pain points, all the reasons they might not purchase or sign up are being covered. And I think having influencers wearing that is a big part of that.
The other side to that would be like UGC. And we've talked about this in the past a little bit, but just, guys, like how do we get UGC done? Like, how are we above influencer giving us the content to run ads, of course, but how are we going about that?
Yeah, like
yes.
I was gonna say, like I'm thinking of, clients on a much smaller scale who have never had any experience with UGC. Like at a most basic level, a lot of the time we're helping clients reach out to people who are tagging them on Instagram, who are using products similar to theirs, literally reaching out to them directly and just saying like, we really think that you would enjoy this product. Can we send you something for free and just exchange for a video or a photo of you using the product and get your thoughts? Like it's really much easier than some people think it is. And you'd be surprised at how many people will just like message on Instagram and they're like, yeah, like I would love this. Like I'll happily send this back to you.
Totally. I think even like Liam was putting Craigslist posts out.
Yeah, Liam's tried everything.
Liam and Brett, and like people were just like, yeah, sure, like send me the product and we do it and then give us content.
Another successful thing that we're doing with a couple brands I know is integrating this into our email strategy. So post purchase, you send somebody an email, thanks for purchasing, blah blah blah. If you're able to, if you like the product, leave us a review. Send us a video of it, or a video of what you think, or a picture, and we'll give you X% off on your next purchase. And that does work quite well, especially for brands that have that reordering potential. Yeah. So consumables, things like that, they're probably going to reorder anyway, and so getting that 10-20% off in exchange for some content is super worth it for them.
And I've talked about this too, but like this, we work with some people, they just send a $20 gift card, Amazon, right? And they just get dozens and dozens and dozens of photos and with the product. And it's just fantastic from an ad ops management perspective.
Yeah. So scrappy grassroots, just get out there, get that UGC. When it comes to these higher level influencers that we're working with, how is it is that a process? Is that like a shared management process between the clients and ourselves? Are we going out and also finding these higher level influencers, or do they often come with the clients?
So it definitely varies because clients definitely do have relationships with some of these influencers. We do some of the outreach. I know Liam's been doing a lot of outreach, but usually that is smaller scale influencers. But with one of the clients I'm working with, they've, like I said, they've got that internal influencer team. And so they've kind of built these relationships over the past year or so, and are constantly reaching out to new influencers. Yeah. So a lot of it does come from the client side of things, because again, they're the ones that have to convince an influencer that they want to be a part of their brand, and send them product, whatever it is.
What we're doing now though, Eric, to that point, is just encouraging companies that we work with to go through this process. And there's agencies out there set up in Cali, that in New York, that kind of have that side organized also. So if there's not an internal team, there are agencies that can generate this type of content for partners and ourselves to run traffic to.
For sure.
And how influencers must be super, they must be like, if I think about influencer marketing and its like life cycle, it's maturing very quickly. Like it's only been around for, a couple of years, 3-4 years, maybe. Like and I know when they started, there's this idea that influencers weren't that savvy, working with them on a performance basis was something that was difficult. I'm curious, in our experience, are they rapidly sort of accelerating their learnings, influencers, and getting savvier about all this?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They know that they're a business. They know they are a Facebook. They are a traffic source, right? The difference though from before, I think, is that like all the sharing has been throttled. So like if you put a post out, you don't see it as much. You have to use like FTC disclaimer if it's a paid post, things like that. So I think it's a little bit more busier than it used to be.
For sure. And they're definitely, they definitely know a lot more about, what marketers are doing and using their content for as well. A lot of them, even as we, reach out to higher following influencers, a lot of them actually have managers who deal with that. So you don't even reach out to the influencer, you're reaching out to their manager who's kind of dealing with all this and obviously knows a lot more than the influencer would. But we're even seeing cases where, they have a BM built out, and, their business pages are built out, which makes it a lot easier integrating the influencer for things like whitelisting.
Yeah.
They're definitely getting more sophisticated in terms of, what we're actually using their content for.
I think like a really important thing to note here though is like where we get a ton of value with like the client that me and Nate work with is they've been working with influencers and high-end influencers for a while. But what like you don't get when you're working directly with an agency that is like sourcing this talent or these influencers is like that feedback loop. So we have communication directly in our Slack channels with the client. So they're often putting requests in for us as to like what we need based on what we're seeing work on Facebook. And then we then send requests back out to the influencers. So there's that communication loop that's like really crucial, that if you're working directly with the influencers or directly with an agency or the creative agency, you're like not going to get.
That's a really good point, Cam. Nate, talk about your early influencer work with this luxury brand and how it's different to what you guys are doing now with the feedback loop.
Yeah, basically, when we started, they kind of just had a handful of, lower tier influencers. They weren't huge or anything. But what we've evolved to is they're actually reaching out to people, with millions of followers. And we're kind of just onboarding new influencers. We're onboarding probably 3 to 5 a week, and with multiple posts and launching those constantly. But what we helped in that process is we helped kind of lay out exactly what we want from influencers, as well as kind of a way of reporting how well their content is doing, because a lot of it is going to be based on payouts. These influencers want to get paid. So we've helped kind of build a strategy around, how we should supplement these influencers based on, performance of their content, and then helped with outreach as well. So we've kind of built systems around and kind of a script around, how to reach out to new influencers, how to explain what we want to do, how to get everything set up. So we kind of help just build out all that process. And now it's just super constant. It flows really well. So
even like small stuff like how they export the actual files to us is like a way bigger of an issue than you think it would be. But like that stuff we're working with influencers on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool. I think we covered a little bit of this, but I wanted to get at one other aspect of it. So like when we launch a campaign, how many different ad types are we rocking with? Like because I know we want to try to take advantage of as many of the ad formats as possible. So when we're launching a new client, how many of these creative types are we launching with?
Yeah, everything. I mean, when launching these new creatives, we want to, again, give Facebook the best chance possible. So, we're testing our top audiences, things we know work, variations of things we know work, but we're also testing different actual ad styles. So, GIFs, videos, carousels, stories, all of it. You want to get everything in there right away, so that you give kind of Facebook as much as it can to work with. So, CBO, multiple audiences, automatic placements, and then different types of ads as well, just to kind of give it the full range and see what really works.
And there's a bit of logic behind that. So there's like this theory, I'm sure a lot of you heard it, but so Facebook allocates, so let's just say there's 8 types of ads. I don't know the actual number, but let's say there's 8 types of ads. Facebook has market share for each of those types of ads and knows which people respond to each type of those ads. And so if you're not giving your angle or your bucket audience or message rather, all of those, you're actually not gonna serve the algorithm well. In that Facebook just won't be delivering your message to other people that will feed the algorithm.
For sure, and I think it's important to note that Facebook knows all of this. They have enough data to know what person, converts better on what placement even, or with what ad style, with video, static, whatever it is, on which placement. So giving Facebook kind of everything it can to work with is definitely the best bet. And
that goes to all platforms, really. There's we're running, it's not just Facebook, we're running Snap, we're running Pinterest, we're running YouTube, we're running in a bunch of different places. And we do the same thing in all those traffic sources also, because each of those placements is going to respond differently, and you're going to find different people within each of those message buckets.
Nice. Okay, well, to bring this back, we're going to close up here. We're coming in on our 30-minute breakdown here. And I wanted to, to bring it back to creative burnout. This topic kind of came to light because we have a client that we're spending at a very high level with, and we experienced some creative burnout this week. One of my questions was like, how close are our clients to wanting to know the nitty gritty detail on why things happen? And I'm sort of answering my own question here. Nate, like you ended up writing 500 words to this client to sort of explain what you saw happening in the marketplace. You laid out this data for what you're sort of seeing in terms of click-through rate and CPMs and all these different things. Can you talk a little bit about that process of sort of keeping clients in the know as to why things are happening and what we're going to do about it?
For sure, yeah. So with the specific client, it's just that a lot of these clients, come from, or maybe not a lot, but some clients come from traditional marketing backgrounds. And so creative burnout doesn't really make sense to them. Well, this has worked so well this week. Why is it dying now? Why isn't it working now? And so it's really, really important to kind of get across the point that creative burnout is a constant. It's bound to happen. You can't stop it from happening on one creative because exactly it works well with one type of person. It doesn't work well with the next. So Facebook needs to find that group of people. It's going to work really well, and then it's going to stop working while it's looking for more people like that group of people. And at scale, they were the ones that kind of pointed out, this is happening faster now. And our response to that is obviously, well, yeah, we're spending twice as much. When you're spending these kinds of budgets, you're going to burn through those audiences really, really fast. And so it's really important to kind of explain why creative burnout happens, but then kind of what we're doing to combat it. So basically just increasing creative testing. So when we're at higher scale, creative burnout's happening faster, you need to just test more. You need to have more creatives constantly pumping out more variations of things that are working to give creatives the best chance of lasting longer. And so it's just really important to kind of give them the whole overview of why it happens, what we're doing to combat it. And so yeah, over the past couple of days here, I was building out a couple presentations based on kind of historical data, what we're seeing now, how long creatives are lasting, all that fun stuff.
And so much of it is like, sorry, just real quick. So much of it is like them not understanding or being educated, and that's why they're working with an agency. But a lot of it is just like proactivity and overproduction. Like just if a client is curious about something, and this is just a tip for any agency out there, just pile in, give them everything they need, throw all your resources at it, and fix it.
Yeah. Or at least explain it.
Yeah.
No, I was looking at Dave's feedback in customer communication. Is like you never want to just say, hey, here's a problem, here's why we think it's happening, without ever saying, here's what we're going to do to fix it. Exactly. And I think this campaign to me is such an interesting one, because we're literally hitting like every kind, a certain kind of person, every single person like that in the country, whether it's every mother or every father, every homeowner. Like, we're trying to saturate an entire country with a specific offer that we think has massive broad appeal to everyone. So you're going to, you're going to run into these walls occasionally where you have these creative burnouts. And obviously we know there's a lot more room to grow with the campaign. You just have to kind of continue to iterate in order to move past it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. CPAs can definitely change drastically just based on creative burnout. And so the only way that we've been able to combat it is just constant testing. Just find that next winner. And when you find it and are able to scale, it definitely kind of outweighs the testing budgets that we've spent.
And in those situations when we're trying to overcome creative burnout, are we trying to layer, an angle that's very close to the old one but subtly different, or how much are we actually testing an angle that's wildly different, or that's sort of that's sort of outside the box of what we're currently trying to do? Are we trying to just build sort of layers out from ideas that work, or are we trying to plant flags in sort of new territory?
We're doing a lot of both. So, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is variation testing, but also a lot of it, and Cam can speak to this, is just, pumping out new stuff. Like, we have weekly brainstorm sessions where we're literally just sitting down trying to think of new angles, new landing page tests, new creative tests. So we're just constantly trying to think of new stuff, as well as, allocating some of our time to just building constant variations of the things that we've been seeing win over the past month or so.
So you're a busy guy, Cam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, with that client specifically, it's we came up with 6 or 7 new concepts just on the call this week of things that we could test in the upcoming future. And some things will be big differences, and some will be small. One will be a landing page that's kind of from this perspective, and we'll just change the perspective a little bit and maybe push it through a third party. So people are getting hit from two different sides, and like it's just there's a whole bunch of different strategies. And then of course pairing it with different creative pairings on like the Facebook side to see if that's effective with this. And so there's lots of different things that we do.
A good point on the third party stuff. So one thing that we also have been seeing really good success with, and this does help with creative burnout, is, you know, building out these, running through these third party assets or brands to promote a product from somebody else's perspective. So, you know, from a review angle, and you can even a lot of times use the same creative, but it's going to work for a different audience because it's coming from a third party. And it's, you know, have you guys heard of this company? This is so great, but you're using the same creative is a lot different than, you know, check out our products using that creative. It's going to work for two different buckets of people. And so that's kind of a really good way to kind of get that creative to work longer, because you're going to be working for both of those audiences at the same time.
And then you get into a case where we have 4 different brands going into the same product.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which has allowed us to do a lot of scale.
You're perfectly teasing the next topic, which we can go in depth on these third-party pages, what we're doing, how we're offering these to clients. And I think that's a whole other topic. But for today, guys, I got to say, I'm sorry I called you Burnouts. I think this has been an incredibly valuable podcast. And I hope people like it. And as always, if you're watching this, let us know in the comments below, you know, what you do for creative burnout. Talk about your creative process. We'd love to hear about it. And yeah, make sure to subscribe to the Pilothouse All Killer No Filler. Through the coming weeks, we're going to be cycling in more and more of our team members to contribute at the same high level that they contribute for our clients every day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Eric.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.